Good morning. Morning. Welcome to all of you, and especially for those of you who missed last night. It was a great evening, and we'll have an even better day today. For those of you who did miss yesterday, we want everyone to know that we are videotaping this, and most presentations will be on our website later in October, as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So if you missed something or want to see it again, you'll be able to, and we'll be sending emails out to let you know when they're available. And with great pleasure, I'm introducing our first speaker this morning, Dr. Stephen Jones. He's a wheat breeder with Washington State University who has his PhD in genetics. Much of grain breeding focuses on increasing yield or pest and disease resistance, but Dr. Jones and his bred lab are pushing the notion that flavor, nutrition, and local food systems should also be key factors in breeding. These are topics that keep coming up in every presentation. He'll tell us about the work of the Bred Lab in creating vibrant regional grain economies and in helping food service operations find grains that make their products really shine. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and first I'd say it's just an honor to be invited and to speak to you this morning, so I want to thank you for that. First and foremost, we're wheat breeders in the Bred Lab, and we do look at yield and disease resistance and things like that, and I think an important point is we also do the other things, and we also set the target at flavor and nutritional density, which is fairly novel, unfortunately, among breeding programs, but it's coming on. So as wheat breeders, we look at variation. We look at tremendous amounts of variation. These are two of my PhD students. Bridget Meintz is on the left. She's in a barley breeding trial, and then Bethany Econopoli is on the right. So both of these students are PhD students in the program. They do everything from work with DNA to plant their own wheat and combine it or barley and bake and cook with it, work with farmers directly, work with their communities directly in terms of access in terms of knowledge and where to get things as well. So, and I'll get into that in a bit more detail. I wanted to give a touch of a historical note here. This is March 29th, 1922. The Northwestern Miller is a widely read magazine, the milling and baking community. Dr. Bishop says that all forms of bread, the pure white variety, of all forms of bread, the pure white variety is the only one which is defective as a food. The outer wrapping of the grain contains a mysterious substance called vitamins, which is essential for proper nutrition. The whole wheat, graham, and bran breads contain this substance. Further, the three healthier brands have a quota of mineral salts being iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium, things like that. But they go on to say that Dr. Bishop is a pseudoscientist, half-educated, and half-educated medical men, food faddists, and quack food cranks who waste their time denouncing the public demand for white bread. That could have been written yesterday, actually. So back to our breeding trials. We work with tens of thousands of different wheats each year. We throw away tens of thousands of wheats each year. We bring in tens of thousands of new wheats each year. This is how any breeding program in the country or the world works. These are two of my former students also. That's Brooke Brower on the left and Karen Hills. They both received their PhDs in this program. As a commodity wheat breeder, which I was for about 25 years, we focused on yield, color, white flour extraction, test weight, protein. That's about it. There are a few others, but we'd have pup loaves baked and we'd see how it works. But the color of that white flour, how much was extracted, the test weight, the hardness, and the color of that kernel, those were the main targets for us in the breeding program. Those were if it didn't fit those, it didn't work. We're in a system now, and we work north of Seattle, and we work with in various regions of the world that are of the country that are out of the commodity system, where those don't have to be our targets. We do purple wheat, we do black wheat, we do purple and black barleys, we do blue wheats. We do wheats that there's no button for at a main grain elevator in this country. If you went with a semi to a grain elevator in Kansas and you have purple wheat, there's no button for it. So we work with places that have more buttons than just the couple. So you see the variation in that field, you see the variation in head types here. How do these taste? What is the nutritional density of those, and what's the functionality? So in our lab, because we're out of place, we're north of Seattle, that's not known as the wheat belt, that's for sure. In eastern Washington, there's about 2.5 million acres of wheat. We deal in an area west of the Cascades, from Alaska down to LA, that is out of that particular grain belt. The average farm size is about 100 acres. In our valley, they grow 80 crops, 80 different crops of commercial significance. Number 79 and 80 in terms of importance to these growers would be barley and wheat. They have to grow barley and wheat to rotate in with their tulips or potatoes or things like that. Our job then is to give value to those two crops that had very little value. We have farmers that say, we grow wheat for fun and sometimes profit. Okay, you don't hear that in Kansas or eastern Washington. They're real wheat growers in these areas. These areas, they're farmers that grow wheat. So how do we make it work? The thing we do is we look at flavor, we look at nutritional density, and we look at functionality. So wheat kernel, you'd be surprised how many bakers have not seen a wheat kernel. Seriously? Let alone a wheat field. That's the inside of a wheat kernel. The nutrient density is that ring around the edge there, right? We know that. That's where our iron, zinc, vitamins, all the things that were sort of denigrated in that article in 22. Wheat flours, we have whites and reds. On the bottom is a white. You can't see the flour very well, but that bottom flour is very yellow. So on the right is going through a roller mill. That's the bran and germ. In the center is the white flour. On the left is the whole grain. You can sort of see some of it here. You can sort of see the yellow in that color right there. That yellow is unacceptable in the commodity market. That would be rejected. So, as breeders, our first step is to make it work for the farmer. It does have to yield for the farmer, and I'll get into that when I talk about heirloom and heritage varieties. The wheat yields that we get north of Seattle can be up to 170 bushels per acre, 150 bushels per acre in organic. The average yield in the state of Kansas is less than 40 bushels per acre, to put in perspective. So a lot of these places that have lost their grains, lost them for reasons other than wheat doesn't grow well there, right? The world record wheat yield in 1919 was set on Whidbey Island, about 10 miles to the west of my office. It was 119 bushels per acre 100 years ago. That's not the record now, that was the record 100 years ago. So a lot of these places are very high yielding wheat growing areas, and they do very well. We got into flavor when we first started where we are. We heard that you can't grow hard red wheat in this area, and you hear that all up and down the western coast. It's a soft white area, you can't grow hard red. So what's the first thing we did when we heard you can't grow hard red? Wait, we planted hard red wheat. What's the second thing we did? We milled it. What's the third thing we did? We brought it to a baker down in Seattle, George De Pasquale, who runs Essential Baking, which is one of the largest organic bakeries west of the Mississippi. George said, and you probably can't read it here, but that's the loaf. He said, nice controlled acid flavors, strong hit of spice, strong hit of chocolate, very easy to work with, very nice flavor, good crumb color, best flavor in 33 years of baking. That absolutely blew us away, right? So I've been growing and working with wheat since '77. If prior to this I had said to anybody that I'd worked with, that has a strong hit of spice and a bit of a chocolatey overtone, I can't even tell you what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been pleasant, right? So that blew us away, and right away we started to appreciate that there could be a terroir, there could be a flavor to what we're doing. And we didn't realize that prior to it, and it works. So these are some of the styles of breads we make. I'd say also that we're interested in home loaves now. So I'm baking at home. All of us are baking more at home, just because this isn't accessible to the average home baker, that style of loaf. Some people can do it, but many can't. I learned to bake when I was 6 years old from my Polish grandmother. What I said yesterday in the questions for Maria's talk, and I really loved Maria's talk yesterday, was people had said how busy everybody is and they can't bake. My Polish grandmother was a single parent with 4 kids in Brooklyn. She cleaned houses for a living, 3 per day, and she baked every day, every night. So we're baking at night. We bake purposefully when we're tired. We come home and we just show that we can bake. I can bake 2 loaves of bread for under $1 a loaf, organic, and spend 18 minutes doing it. That's not proofing, that's not baking. That's cleanup, that's setup, that's mixing, that's all that stuff in under 20 minutes for less than $1 a loaf, and there's 4 ingredients in that bread. It's not a plastic wrap with 25 ingredients in it. The key for us as breeders is to connect the proper variety to the use or the function. So if we have varieties that work very well for the farmer, and again, that's key for us, what is the best use for it? Is it a tortilla? Is it a pasta sheet? Is it a strong bread? Is it a weak bread? Is it a scone? What is it? And then connecting the chefs and the bakers with that. This is Marc Vetri. He had a book that came out last year called Mastering Pasta. He's recognized as one of the top Italian chefs in the country, if not the world. He called us from Italy a few years ago, and he said, I'm in Italy, and the pasta folks here, the chefs, aren't just using straight Durham white flour in what they're doing. They're using whatever they have, and they're making it work. What do you think about that? And I said, yeah, I think we can do that. So he said, I'll fly to Seattle on my way home from Italy. Well, I didn't tell him that you can go from Italy to Philadelphia a hell of a lot easier than stopping in Seattle on the way. But he did, and he came in, and this picture was taken about 10 minutes after he got there. Sorry. This is Red Russian. This is a 5-foot noodle sheet. Red Russian is an older variety. It's the one that set the world's record on Whidbey Island in the teens. We couldn't make it work for bread. It's an incredible tasting wheat, but we couldn't make it for bread. We had flour out on the counter. Marc made the sheet out of it, and it made 100% whole wheat. It made an incredibly buttery type of pasta that you would want to eat at 100% whole wheat. And we've all had really bad 100% whole wheat pasta. And I know there's a talk later that's going to talk about really good whole wheat pasta, but pasta is one of the tougher ones to get a really good 100% whole wheat. And this is a buttery and a beautiful pasta. Marc went home and bought a mill, and he has a mill in his main restaurant now in Philly, and he fresh mills. And I should say, too, in case I forget later, in the lab, we're big proponents of fresh milling. We mill right into the bowl. And many bakers are going that way. 100% whole wheat waffle that I made at home. This is a sourdough pre-ferment overnight. That's pairing the proper variety with the product. So that's a waffle made with 100% whole wheat. You see the loft on that, and it's sourdough. So it's a long ferment, highly nutritious. That's a club wheat. So that's a wheat at about 8% protein, white, 100%. You see the color too is quite pleasing, I would say. That's just basically pairing the proper product. 100% whole wheat croissant is impossible to make. Here's one that was made by Jeff Yankelo at King Arthur Flour. Jeff is also the head of the Bread Bakers Guild of America. So Jeff came into our lab and paired the proper flour with the technique. This has no helpers in it. This is just 100% whole wheat, butter, and whatever else he's putting in there. So Jeff can do these routinely. So this was the holy grail for us, was 100% whole wheat croissant that someone would want to eat. In our experience, once people eat these, they never want a white one again. It's that simple. It has a uniqueness, it has nuance to it. Okay, and granted, we're talking about tens or hundreds of people, not thousands or millions, but it works very well, and it has just a wonderful flavor to it. No bitter, no whatever. We released a new wheat variety this last week. We think it's the first wheat variety released that has never been roller milled. So as varieties are released to the growers, they go through a process of test baking and pup loaves and things like that. It's almost exclusively white flour. A new variety that we have has never been through a roller mill. It's all stone mill. We sent it out to bakers across the country to see how they like it, and they loved it. And what I want to address here is something on heirloom and ancient and heritage wheats as well. This is Josie Baker at the mill in San Francisco. She's one of the best bakers in the country. I think we can agree on that. This is 100% whole wheat. This is the variety release. This is a hard white, same thing, 100% whole wheat. Josie says, heirloom, ancient, heritage, these terms used to be so sexy to me. A couple of years ago, we got 2 wheats to try from a local farm. We're the ones that sent it to them. One was an heirloom variety, and the other wasn't. We milled them and baked them off and did a blind taste test. We liked the variety much more, the modern variety much more. I think it's a very important point, is as wheat breeders, our job is to improve wheat. The wheat breeders that developed Red Fife and the older varieties, their goal was to produce a better wheat, one that yields more, that works for the farmer. We think heirlooms, ancient, and heritage wheats have a place. That place is pretty much as a stopgap until we can develop new wheats that have the flavors and the functionalities that are cherished in these older wheats, including the story, right? So we love the older wheats. We think they're great, but we don't think they're sustainable. That if for us, we have an ancient or heirloom wheat and it yields 1,000 pounds per acre, and our new wheats can yield 10,000 pounds per acre, that's good for everybody. That's good all the way to the baker because they can charge less for the loaf of bread and pull the price point down. That's good for the miller because they're buying their wheat for less. It's good for the farmer because they're getting more out of their farm. It's just that simple. So we love the old stuff. We need to move on from it too. That's 100% whole wheat baguette made out of the same variety that's used right there. This wheat is organic. This wheat was grown north of Seattle. This wheat yields about 150 bushels per acre. That allows a price point to come down. The last thing we want to do in our lab is create a two-tier system where we're having to price people out of what they can get. And in Maria's talk yesterday, too, she said that good food, to paraphrase, good food should be as affordable as bad food. Bad food in quotes, however we want to define it, right? But food that's not nutrient-dense and over-processed, if we put that in quotes too, however we want to define these things, good food, basic food that we're processing minimally, why is it more expensive? I don't get it. There's less going into it. There really is, right? So if we talk about access and fairness, we take that very seriously in our lab. That's a shot of the lab there. That's Bethany Econopoli running a farinograph. That's Jonathan Bethany baking some loaves here. I'll let you digest that one for a second. This is, and I'll have another one that follows it, but this is an exercise we did with a single wheat from a single year from a single field. So it's one variety of wheat in one field in 1 year. We're going to take it into the lab. So here's the wheat right here. And we're going to do a few things with it. We're going to mill it on our little roller mill. We're going to mill it on our stone mill. We're going to malt it. We're going to prime it, which is soaking or what people are calling sprouting now. It's not technically sprouting. It's just soaking it in water for a bit and then drying it out. Or we're going to pop it. So we're just going to put it in hot pans and pop it and see what we get. We're going to see what we get functionally. So the darker ones, it's not super clear, but the darker ones are functionalities of it. The lighter ones are flavors, right? So again, one wheat, 1 year, one field. If we do a base roller mill, we're going to make white flour, and we're going to look at the strength of that. We're going to look at the volume, and we're going to look at the whiteness of the flour, quite frankly. How white is that flour? The whiter the better, right? Glow-in-the-dark white, beautiful. Okay, we love it, right? That's what we get off the roller mill. Okay, now we're going to take that same wheat and we're going to stone mill it on our little stone mill. These flavors that I'm showing here are picked up by third graders that come through the lab, all the way up to some of the best chefs, top chefs and bakers in the world. Grassy. The Grassy that we get north of Seattle is different than the Grassy that Andrew Ross gets in the southern Willamette Valley of Oregon with the same variety in the same year. We get Grassy, we get hay. Not all of these are good. We can get wheat flavors that have that chocolate and spice. We can get a dryness, of course. We can pull bitter out. We can pull sweet out, right? Depends how we're doing it. Brightness is something we get in our fresh milled products all day long, right? If we mill right into a bowl and we bake with it, you get a brightness that's beyond the sour. So I should say that all the products we do in the lab, essentially all the products are 100% whole wheat, no cheating, we don't sift. We use a natural ferment, salt, and water in with that flour. Brightness is something that always comes through on their best wheats. We have variation. We have some wheats that taste like wet cardboard, right? We don't do much more with those. So that's what we pull there. Okay, now you go around the whole thing. We can malt, of course, to pick up all kinds of clove spice. We have banana smoothie on here somewhere up here. Banana smoothie, we can press. We can leave the malt wet and press it, and we get something like a malt milk that tastes like a banana smoothie. Okay, I don't know if we want that. These are used in culinary uses. A lot of the malt that we're working with now goes into culinary. This example is one wheat, one field, one variety. We work with tens of thousands of wheats. So just start multiplying this by whatever you want, right? And that's what's there. And that's what the chefs and bakers and the culinary end and the end users and the serious home bakers are beginning to appreciate is they don't know what they can get. They don't have an idea because they haven't been exposed to it. We're helping expose them to purple wheats, to black wheats, to purple barleys, black barleys, to all of these things that they can have accessible. We're also exposing them to wheats that are developed 100% for 100% whole wheat. All the whole wheat products that we're making, or almost all of them, are baked and cooked off of wheats that were developed for a roller mill and white flour. So we're compromising right away. That's the reason people are going to heritage and heirloom, because they weren't, right? If it was prior to 1870, it was coming through a stone mill, and that's how it was designed. They were a little softer and things like that. So I think it's an important point. I'll end with some of our partners. This is my other PhD student, Colin Kern McAdams. I think he's late for lunch or something there. These are some of our partners. We work with many folks. Cliff Bar Family Foundation and Seed Matters funds my PhD students. When you're at a university, you don't have base funding. A lot of people don't know that. We don't have base funding. We get bills for things. So then we have partners that will help us pay those bills. My salary's paid and one of my technicians' salaries paid. That's it. Everything else we have to bring in. We have students, we have to get money for them, right? That's how universities work now. Cliff Bar is very good at that. We don't breed wheat or barley or oats for better Cliff Bars. We're training the next generation of plant breeders that can go out into their communities and do work similar to what we're doing. We're working at Drexel University in Philly. We're putting a bread lab in Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia. We want an urban version of what we're doing. So we work with Marc Vetri and Drexel University, and Whole Foods is also involved in that. Here, Whole Foods is a sponsor of what we do. We work with La Brea. They're a sponsor of our laboratory. We work with many local farmers and bakers. We work with some of the smallest bakers in the world. If you look at that, I have a single home baker somewhere that's making bread every Sunday morning, and we work with La Brea. There's the scale, the range that we work with is mind-blowing for us, right? And it's important to appreciate the complexity of what that scale means, and then what that scale means in terms of access. So we're working with New York City schools. We're also working with our local school districts. New York City schools, I think it's 17 million hamburger buns a year, right? Almost 1 million meals a day they're serving. And then we work with our very small little rural school system. So the whole range there is mind-blowing. Chipotle, we're working with tortillas on Chipotle, and I'm going to end with a story on tortillas in my mother's refrigerator. King Arthur Flour has been a partner with us from the start. Patagonia is getting into food. So how many of you know that Patagonia is getting into food? So the textile manufacturer Patagonia wants to do for food what they've done for textiles. And what they've done for textiles is if you buy a down garment from Patagonia, they can tell you that that animal was not plucked alive that produced that down. You just turn that one upside down. So Patagonia Provisions is working with food. We're working with buckwheat. First with them, and then we're working with perennial wheats, blue wheats, and different things for their food. I want to tell just a quick story. Do I have a second more? How am I doing time-wise? A little long. Yeah, I'll shorten it up. My mother's 93 years old. I went a few months ago to clean out her refrigerator. In the very back, it's the first thing I do when I go there is clean out a refrigerator. In the very back was a pack of flour tortillas that I somehow missed. And I pulled them out, and they were pliable, and it looked like we could have had them for lunch or dinner. And I looked at the date, and it was October of 2014 is when they expired. Okay, so let's define our food. Is that how we want our food? If so, what does it take? We know what it takes. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. This was really, really interesting. I was wondering if you could comment on the conversations we hear about nutrient-deficient modern wheat and the root development from a growing perspective.
And the what development?
The roots. Do you hear a lot of this
Well,
conversation?
I wouldn't say so. I don't think it's nutrient deficient. It depends how it's treated. So, and I'd like to say too, for us is we don't comment on other systems per se. We're offering an alternate system or a system that we want to be accessible and affordable and more regional. I never use the word local either. So we want to get beyond for us, we want to get beyond the cliche of local and just talk about things that make sense within our communities. I don't have anything to say on that other than wheat doesn't have to be nutrient deficient. I don't think it is if it's used as a whole grain product, certainly not. We have variations, so we know that we've done and published studies on wheat that's been grown. There's 163 wheats that have been grown in the state of Washington since 1840. We grew 163, we grew 160 of them. So you talk about old wheat. So we grew all 160, and then we looked at them and saw how did the iron change over time? How did the magnesium or zinc change? It did change because we're going for less ash. And if you're selecting for less ash, what's ash? Ash is iron, zinc, it's those micronutrients. So we know that. That's a matter of the system and things. We also know that there are modern wheats that have a relatively high level of iron, zinc. There's some that don't. If we don't look for it as breeders, it's just going to be all over the board. So if we can actively select for iron, we can raise the iron very easily. We have wheats that easily have 50% more iron, easily, just by grabbing them. And if that's a target, then that will improve the nutritional density of everything. But I don't agree that wheat as a whole is nutrient deficient. It's one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. What we do to it makes it one of the least nutrient-dense foods on the planet, right? And we have to then enrich that product that we took out of it, right? We took that 30% away, threw it away, whatever we did with it. We supercharged the gluten in it, right? Because that 30% we took away, the bran and the germ, there's no gluten in it by definition. Now we're dealing with something that's primarily gluten and starch, and we have to enrich it. Otherwise, if that's all we ate, we get berry. It's pretty bad, okay? Or not bad, but it's pretty true, I'll tell you that. Yes?
I just wondered if you'd comment on perennial wheats.
On what? Sorry.
On the perennial wheat varieties that people are growing? Are
Sure,
you working on
sure.
some?
So we've been, the question was on perennial wheats. We've been working on perennial wheat since 1995. Our funding, there's another thing where the funding sort of comes and goes on it. Patagonia is interested in our perennial wheats right now. Our perennial wheats will be blue. They'll be a much larger seed than Kernza. We work with the Land Institute. We work in parallel with them. They're trying to domesticate a wild wheat. We're trying to make our domestic wheat more wild. That makes sense. And they'll be colored. And the ones we have right now are blue. We have a line that we're working with. It's called Salish Blue. It's malted, and when we malt it, it's just an amazing flavor. I should say super quick, too, that within a 4-minute walk of our bread laboratory, and again, we're about an hour north of Seattle, we have a new malting facility that they put $12 million into. I think it's the most advanced malting facility in the country, if not the world. These people run the machines off their cell phones. We have a new flour mill going in that will do buckwheat and flour. Buckwheat and wheat flour up to 14 million pounds a year, I believe. It'll be online in February. King Arthur and Patagonia are helping to fund that. We have a college that has a brewing course now, brewing certificate. We have a commercial brewery that's doing 10,000 barrels per year. All of that's within a 4-minute walk of where we are. So we have a true grain hub going in right there right now. And it's done to keep value where it's produced for us. So no longer do we grow wheat, send it away, and bring in flour. We do the flour right there. No longer do we grow barley, send it away, and bring in malt, and then bring in beer. The malt is made, the beer is made, everything's made right there. And with never using the word local. We don't use the word local, or try not to. And I just did. So.
Are there any other questions?
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful.